All around the country, people are gearing up for bow fishing season, and they need to make sure that their equipment is ready to go as well. So today we're going to focus on arrows. Now, if you've bow fished at all, you know that it's entirely possible to lose an arrow during the course of a fishing trip. And if that happens and you don't have any backups, your night is going to get cut short pretty quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on how to build your own arrows today, which includes installing the tip, installing a nock, and I highly recommend the use of safety slides, which also includes the use of a stopper and a slide. After that, we are going to focus on a couple of different ways to make sure that your tip doesn't get separated from your arrow over time. All right, we're going to be starting with a basic fiberglass shaft. These shafts are available from any online bow fishing retailer, and they will ship them directly to you. They typically come with one end that is prepped for a nock. They typically come with a hole that would allow you to install a safety slide stopper. I like to start with the nock, and I like to know which system I'm planning to use, which might include a safety slide. And if I'm planning to use a safety slide and I'm going to have the stopper in place on the arrow, I want to make sure that the nock aligns with the stopper. And what that would allow me to do is when I nock the arrow onto the bow, the nock and the stopper are in alignment as I get ready to shoot. And that's an important consideration. If I'm just tying to the back and I'm not going to use a safety slide or a stopper, then it's not as critical which way I mount my nock. Typically, I will go 90 degrees from the holes if I'm tying to the back, so that the line comes out the sides rather than the top and bottom, because as it's shooting forward, the line might hit the rest and eventually wear through. If I'm using a safety slide, I'm going to put the nock in alignment with the hole. If I'm going to tie to the back, I would typically align the nock 90 degrees away from the holes on the arrow. Now, to actually put the nock on the arrow, I'm just going to use Gorilla Glue, super glue. I take the end of the nock, and these are the types of nocks that I like to use. These are 5/16 nocks, and they come in a package of 12, and they do not have shoulders, meaning that you can easily take a safety slide and you can slide it right over the nock. Now, there are situations you might encounter where you may want to be able to remove your safety slides, and this nock will allow that to happen. So I take my glue, and I just put a small amount of glue inside. It doesn't take more than a drop or so. And I spin the nock on and align it the way I suggested earlier. And in this case, we're going to align it to the holes on the arrow. Now, while that's setting up, and it takes 10 to 15 seconds to start to set up, I will actually move forward with installing my safety slide. So I'm going to take the safety slide and I'm going to slide it onto the arrow. And in this case, you see how that there's a set of shoulders on the safety slide that are curved. You want those to be facing forward towards the tip of the arrow. Once the safety slide is on, then you can start to work on your stopper system. And the stopper system has 3 components associated with it. There is the primary plastic body for the stopper. There is a small bushing that also slides inside of the stopper, and then there's the screw. There is a curvature to the bushing that you want to match up to the curvature of the safety stop. It'll slide right inside and form a nesting situation. And then once you have the bushing installed inside of the stopper, then you move over to the arrow itself, and you are going to take your screw, get the screw started into the hole, and then you'll use a Phillips screwdriver to finish things off. Tighten this down until the stopper doesn't move around on the arrow anymore. Nice and engaged with the arrow. The safety slide will come down, it'll hit against the stopper and prevent it from sliding off of the arrow. All right, so we've got 3 of the components on the arrow. The next thing that we want to install is the tip of the arrow. And this particular tip that I'm getting ready to install is called a TNT 4-barb. These are excellent for large fish. They hold up extremely well in a variety of conditions. They penetrate extremely well. This piece is the ferrule that installs on the arrow. And then once you have this installed on the arrow, you can change the tip out. So this would just slide onto the end of the arrow. And I don't have any glue on it yet, but that's how I'm going to install the ferrule. I am going to put some glue on the inside of the ferrule. A couple of drops. Nothing too substantial. I don't need to flood that. Slide it onto the end of the arrow and twist. And the orientation of this is not as important. And then once this starts to set up, then you would be able to install the tip onto the end of the arrow. Now, I would just wait for the glue to completely dry before I ended up using this arrow, but for all intents and purposes, this arrow is ready to go. We have the tip glued on, we have the safety slide in place, the stopper is oriented properly, and the nock is glued on as well. This arrow is essentially ready to tie on to a bow and used for bow fishing. Now, there's a couple of scenarios where you may actually want to make sure that you have a little bit more insurance that your tip is not going to separate from the arrow. In most situations, gluing the tip on is perfectly suitable, but there are some situations where you want to make sure that your tip stays engaged, and there's a couple of different ways to do that. And the first way that we're going to focus on is called pinning. And pinning an arrow on means that if you have a certain type of tip that has a hole that's already drilled in it, then you can open up the hole through the arrow, and then you can install a roll pin, which basically keeps the tip in place no matter how hard the fish is pulling. People use this in situations where they're going after extremely large fish like alligator gar or stingrays. In order to install the roll pin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 7/64 drill bit, and I am going to open up the hole on the arrow. You can see now that I've got that hole completely opened up. And as far as the roll pin is concerned, it may not start right away without a little bit of crimping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a set of pliers and I'm going to crimp the roll pin just on one end, just enough so that it can start into the hole. So I basically close the gap up on the roll pin on one end. I'm going to get this started into the hole. Then I'm going to use a pair of channel lock pliers. I'm going to open them up just a little bit, and I'm going to push the roll pin into the arrow. Again, in most scenarios, you wouldn't necessarily need this type of insurance, but if it was really critical that your tip did not separate from your arrow, you may want to take this extra precaution. All right, now you can see that I've pushed the roll pin all the way through. Now on both sides of the tip, the roll pin is in place, and now I can use a small grinder or whatnot to clean up the edges of this. I bought this roll pin assortment from Harbor Freight Tools, and it definitely had the size that I needed inside. So if you pick up this assortment, it's not very expensive. You'll have all the roll pins that you need to make probably 10 to 20 arrows easily. Last but not least, we are going to use a crimper. And I am going to use the middle hole on my crimper. So I'm going to open this up, and I am going to slide the arrow into that center hole, or that middle hole that I was talking about. And I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on it. And all I need to do is just deform the tip slightly. I don't need to go all the way. And you can see the indentations now that I've put into the arrow. And that is how to build an arrow and make sure that your tips never leave the arrow again. Now for me, some of the key elements in regards to arrows are, if I'm going for holding power, I'm going to use something like the TNT 4-barb. This one is extremely effective in holding bigger fish. There's also an option from Interlock. This is the Interlock 3-barb grapple. Does an excellent job on big fish and holding power. Then if I'm going to be shooting smaller fish, or I want to make sure that I can get the fish off quickly, this is a Sure Shot tip. And the Sure Shot tip, the nice thing about this is that you twist part of the body just a little bit and the barbs will spin around, and it makes taking the fish off extremely easy. In fact, with the weight of the fish, you put the fish down inside the bucket and then you just twist the arrow shaft with your hand and the barbs will spin around inside the fish and you can slide the fish off very quickly. And then once you get the arrow back in hand, you twist the barbs back down, twist the body of the tip, and now you're ready to go again. The Sure Shot is an excellent numbers shooting tip. And then of course there's multiple options from AMS. AMS has, these are their standard tips. This is a shorter barb model, and typically once the tip is screwed down, the barbs will only spin around about halfway. And then if you get a fish on, you just untwist the tip a little bit and then the barbs will flip completely around. They have a longer barb model, which works very similar, a little bit extra holding power. And then AMS also has a couple of different tips like the AMS Anchor QT, which is again a quick turn model, which is kind of similar to the Sure Shot. Once it's in the fish, if you just spin the arrow shaft, you can slide the fish off because the barbs are going to flip around on the arrow itself. And then they also have an Anchor FX. And the Anchor FX is most closely related, I would say, to like the interlock grapple, where the barbs are very strong and it's got excellent holding power on bigger fish. It's not as large of a tip. I probably carry 10 to 15 arrows on my boat at any given time, and it's really important that I have multiple options depending on the type of bow that people are shooting, depending on the type of reel and line that people are shooting. Please consider using slides on your arrows. There is definitely some cases of people that have been seriously injured by tying to the back of their arrows. And when they tie to the back of their arrows, there's the potential for the arrow to snap back. The safety slide was invented to make sure that that doesn't happen. If you have any questions about any of the process or any of the tips or any of the techniques that I incorporated in today's video, don't hesitate to leave a comment. If you like this content, don't forget to hit the like button down below. And I think I got something else that's pretty special right up here. If you like that video as well, maybe you ought to consider subscribing to the channel. Hang out with me a little bit more here at This Week in Bowfishing.